Hey guys, man, it is hot outside. We are getting ready to pour a concrete pad for a grain bin that we're going to be building. And we're going to use the same transit that we used on the tile job to make sure that the top of the concrete form is where we want it and that it is level. And on down, you'll see the rebar that's in there. Hopefully that ends up in the center of the concrete. Use the transit to figure out where that's going to go so that it'll reinforce it. Concrete has high compressive strength, but naturally low tensile strength, and the rebar is going to help with some of that. You might notice the cable around the top of the concrete form. Concrete's really heavy. When we pour that into these forms, it's going to try to push the top of this out unless you put that cable on there, and that's going to keep the top of that together and hopefully keep that from spreading on us. There's Ryan. Ryan is applying a form release to the forms so that way it's easier to separate them from the concrete once the concrete is cured. Okay, so right before we pour, you'll notice that deeper area along the outside edge. That is called a footer, and what that is going to do is just add some strength and also kind of help lock the concrete pad in place. But the weight of the grain is going to be mostly on that edge from the corrugations and the sidewall of the bin itself. As that grain dries, it's going to settle and it's going to pull on those corrugations, so you want that outside edge thick. We're going to pour the footer first so that it holds the form in place, and then we'll pour the rest of the pad. All right, to meet the crew, it's Abe and Ryan. Oh yeah. And Sawyer. Lorelei. Grandpa. Jim's he wants to move that pile of dirt so this guy can get up here. Hey, concrete workability is measured in slump. The higher the number, the runnier it is. The lower the number, the drier, or like the thicker it's going to be. So we're running about a number 6 on our slump today. And that's going to be what we consider a fairly high slump. But for us, that makes it nice and workable and easier to get it everywhere where we need it to be. All right. Now here in a little bit, we'll go around the outside edge with like a hammer and tap on those forms, and that'll get rid of the little air bubbles and stuff and have a nice smooth concrete finish on the outside edge. But these front dump trucks are really nice because you can tell he's doing a lot of the work for you, and he's able to see and put that concrete exactly where you want it, which means less muscling it around. All right, we can see the grid work, and that's actually held off of the gravel. It's just reinforcement. So that keeps helps keep the concrete together. If it gets a crack in it, it helps keep it together. Makes it a little stronger. Concrete's got really high compressive strength, not necessarily good tensile strength. So that adds to it. There's Jim. And once we start doing the pad, we got that rod. Have you guys seen this before? We got that bar going across. The bottom of that bar is where we want the top of the concrete. So we'll drag that around and smooth out the top. Yeah, so Jim's just going around with a rod, working up and down, basically just trying to work some air bubbles out of the concrete so it ends up with a nice smooth surface on the side. Then a piece of metal C-channel, that'd be called we're using it like what they would call a screed board. If you're doing a sidewalk or whatever, you'd have it could be a 2x4 or whatever that you work on both sides of your forms. So sort of details are important, like all these little posts holding the concrete form in place have to be lower than the top of the form or they'll get in the way of your board. There's Ben and Adeline. Okay, so eventually I get pressed into service here, and I am running the screed board. So in the center of our bin, we have a pin that the other end of the screed board is resting on, so that the bottom of it ends up at the height of the top of the bin floor. And of course, the concrete forms are holding up the other end. The top of that concrete form is the top of where you want the floor to end up. So this screed board just kind of rotates around on that pin and sits on the top of these forms, and you always want to keep concrete in front of it, and you don't want to do that like where I'm backed up right there. Ideally, I mean, sometimes, you know, like I did there, you gotta cheat and do that, but if you get it perfect, you don't have to, and you really don't want to. You just want to keep concrete in front of it the whole time and just kind of keep pushing it around so that it ends up nice and uniform all the way. I had a small hole that ended up in front of it that I didn't see, and I had to go back and fill it in, and if you're not careful when you back up, that might cause a high spot in it later. So Jim's going around right now. He's tapping on the outside of the forms, and what that's going to do is make sure that the bin wall, the concrete side wall ends up looking nice and smooth. And he's just going to kind of keep doing that. I don't know if he's going to make 1 or 2 laps. And looks like concrete truck number 2 is pulling in. This took 10 yards of concrete, so basically 2 full trucks, even though it was a pretty small grain bin. And it ended up working out real close. Anything that you don't use, you end up paying for, and it goes back to the plant. So you want to estimate that really closely, but at the same time, you don't want to run out, because that's going to cause, you know, some weakness in the concrete. We don't want to run out partway through the pour and have to be waiting on a truck to show up. So you want to guess it close, but you also want to allow yourself maybe a little bit extra. On this job, it worked out really nicely for us. Okay, so this step is called bull floating, and basically what we're doing is pushing down all of the big aggregate. Like when that was actually being poured, you saw the larger rocks and stuff falling out of it, or, you know, falling with it. It was all part of the mix. But anyway, this bull floating, you're pushing down the larger aggregate, and you're drawing like the finer aggregates up to the top, along with the water and the cement, and trying to give it a smooth finish. And we really like these newer bull floats. I mean, they've had these for a long time, but you can twist the handle on this to change the angle of the head on it, because you always want the leading edge to be up a little bit. You can change the amount of aggressiveness on that, but you don't want it digging in. You just want it to slide across the top and keep working. And on this, between the first and second pour, it actually maybe cured on us a little bit too much, or almost did anyway, but we ended up getting this finished up and looking pretty good here. All right, so one of the tricks is getting these ridges out in between the passes, and you got to catch it when it's just got just the right amount of cure to the concrete to where you're not creating more ridges, but you're able to smooth these down. At least that's kind of what I've found out. And of course, you know, I don't do concrete every day. We do a lot of different things. Guys that do this every day might know another trick. All right. So this is edging, and what that does is takes the sharp corner off the concrete, so that way it doesn't get broken or chipped off later. But Ryan's the only one that knows how to do the edger good, so I can't go all the way around. I don't even know how to use it. So we let Ryan do that. Yeah, it's beautiful. Right, so this is a chemical reaction called hydrolysis. It's not really drying. It's your Portland cement is reacting with water and curing. And tomorrow morning, when everything else is nice and cool, this will actually have a little bit of heat radiating off of it from that chemical reaction. So kind of interesting. We'll come back later today and put some sealer on this. That's about all there is to it. Working concrete's kind of fun because it's a little too wet, and you wait, and then you try to catch it, and then it's too dry. So, but you do have to, you can't ignore it. You do have to pay attention to it, keep an eye on it. So when you see a bunch of guys sitting around on a concrete job looking at the concrete, it's what they're doing, waiting until it's just right so that they can finish it up. Or it's an ag teacher, and he's videotaping some guys working on the concrete.